yeah, that's better, thank you. I'll do my best to keep you entertained. After lunch is always a difficult period. Before I start, I must just congratulate the previous speakers and the panelists for the quality of the input. And I almost feel like a lot of the input has built up to what I want to share with you this afternoon. So we are here together, and I thank Succeed for coordinating this event so that as stakeholders, regulators, we can see how we can become involved in the discussions and align and coordinate in the same direction, so that we have a holistic approach to sustainability, to how we incorporate sustainability standards in the South African environment. So I represent the King Committee here, and we are not a regulator of hard law, rather a regulator of soft law. We provide, of course, the voluntary guiding standards for corporate governance for South Africa. But even though the King IV code and report are not mandatory, it is voluntary but not without influence. Market and social forces often use these standards as a lever for their activities, and the courts, of course, use it as a reference point when assessing directors and whether they've performed their duties. So how the court deals with it is that the court would refer to the King Code recommendations to determine whether directors have acted with due care, skill and diligence. So if in the main they've met the King IV recommendations or the King Report recommendations, whatever the version, the relevant version at the time might be, they are safe in terms of meeting the required standard. So as the King Committee, we take this influence that we have very seriously. We see it as a serious responsibility. And we've also had to face questions, as you can imagine, as to how we are going to deal with the sustainability reporting standards in the King Code. And so there were various considerations that we had to take into account. We've started this conversation already at the King Committee, but I have to say it's only at an initial stage, so please see my comments in that light. So the document that we've discussed outlined policy considerations at 3 levels. We said we needed to determine policy at country level, in other words, what we're trying to achieve as a country through the sustainability standards. Then we need to determine which organizations will be subjected to the sustainability standards, if at all, through the King Code. And then we also need to look at it at process level, because at the moment, the FRSC's mandate is not broad enough to accommodate sustainability standards, only financial standards, and therefore, with that not having been addressed, we need to carefully understand how the King Committee's role play out in the bigger ecosystem. Right, so let me start at the country level. So, I think when we look at sustainability standards, and a couple of speakers and panelists made this point already, we need to determine the objectives for the sustainability reporting. So is it to meet investor requirements and being competitive in the international environment, or is it also to change behavior through accountability? Now, as the King Committee, we would like it to not only be a compliance exercise, we would like for it to be something that changes behavior through holding organizations accountable, something that delivers real output. Because what we are addressing here
is really the future that we're shaping for our children and their children, for future generations. And to my mind, that should be the higher ambition after we've discussed the shorter term goals. So let me, before I go further on that particular point, let me explain to you where we come from as the King Committee generally on sustainability reporting. So we've always had a tradition of a strong and a progressive view of sustainability reporting. In King 2, which was issued in 2002, I'm talking more than 20 years ago, the following was said, and I quote, "What stakeholders are looking for are reports that evidence good stewardship by the directors. While communicating in financial terms is retrospective, this is in a language that is understandable to all stakeholders. The difficulty with communicating the less defined sustainability or non-financial aspects is that no universal reporting standard or language has yet been developed. And the King 2 report therefore called for such standards to be developed. This was in 2002 already, as I've pointed out. So it's clear that we obviously support the aim of the IFRS Foundation for high quality, transparent and comparable sustainability-related reporting. So I've spoken about King 2, issued in 2002. King 3 then was issued in 2008. And in King 3, we introduced the concept of integrated reporting, meaning that sustainability reporting and financial reporting had to be not only connected, but integrated. At that point, I was already part of the drafting team, and I know that there was an intent to elevate the importance of sustainability reporting to be on par with financial reporting. So, for example, in King 3, we provided for the audit committee's responsibility to oversee not only financial reporting, but also sustainability reporting and integrated reporting, and to ensure that the integrated reporting integrates the financial and the non-financial information. We also provided for the audit committee considering the scope of assurance and the type of assurance over the sustainability information. So already there was an intent to escalate the importance of sustainability reporting. So then when King 4 was issued in 2016, the concept of integrated reporting has evolved quite significantly, not only locally but also internationally. King 4 is very strong on stakeholder inclusivity, as was King 3, by the way. Stakeholder inclusivity. We strongly believe that the audience of the integrated report should be stakeholders, material stakeholders, and not only the providers of financial capital. For those of you who are familiar with King 4, you will know that we didn't use the term double materiality because at the time that we drafted King 4, it wasn't a known term, but the concept that we introduced, namely that organizations should be accountable for stakeholders for the consequences that their operations have on these stakeholders, you can follow it like a golden thread throughout King 4. If you look at strategy formulation, if you're looking at how we phrase the monitoring of strategy, for example, that organizations should monitor impact and that they should mitigate that impact, they should report on that impact, they should reward in accordance with sustainability measures. So double materiality has been woven into the content of King 4. Now this is where we hit a bit of a difficult point because we have this long tradition of stakeholder inclusivity, of being quite progressive about the need for organizations to be responsible and accountable for their contribution to sustainable development and their negative impact on the economy, society, and the environment. So, and the reason why I'm saying we hit a bit of a difficulty is, of course, if you look at the ISSB Sustainability Disclosure Standards, you'll see it does not, of course, follow a double materiality approach. It follows the financial materiality approach. In other words, in terms thereof, organizations should disclose information about sustainability-related risks and opportunities that can reasonably affect the cash flow and its access to finance and debt capital over the short, medium, and long term. So it's about effects inward on the company. It's not about the outward effects on stakeholders. There are some who argue that this approach lets companies off the hook for reporting the negative consequences of their business operations on society and the environment. And I do think it's a valid criticism, because why are we not requiring of companies to disclose on this negative effect? We say it's only when the negative effect on the environment and society turn inward to hit you as a company that you need to report on it. So the response then that I've heard to this argument that it's letting companies off the hook is that it doesn't matter. And the reason why it doesn't matter whether you follow a double materiality or financial materiality approach is then because there's a high correlation between the interest of shareholders and stakeholders over the longer term. And when I read to you what financial materiality entails in terms of the ISSB standards, it's about that which can affect your cash flows or your access to finance and capital over the short, medium, and long term. Now, as I said, over the long term, there's a high correlation between stakeholder interest and shareholder interest. So the argument goes, well, then if we report over the long term, actually that would result in reporting the same things. But I think what that argument does not take into account is that, firstly, when reporting companies determine what entails materiality, and secondly, in what time frame, both those two considerations are wide open for a range of judgments. And here I'm not attributing any mala fides to any of the reporting companies. I'm just saying it is widely open for judgment. And it may perhaps just be easier to make the reporting requirement a double materiality one. But I'll get back to that. The other argument that I've heard is that double materiality reporting is too onerous, that organizations can't be expected to, at this stage when we're transitioning, report on double materiality. But at the same time, to those who critique the financial materiality approach of the ISSB standards, are told that, no, don't worry, your report with the ISSB standards will be supplemented by another report, the sustainability report. And this is a report that you can direct to your stakeholders. So see, you're going to report to both your shareholders, your providers of financial capital, and your other stakeholders. And then I wonder to myself, where does this argument go, where we're saying that double materiality reporting is actually more work if the financial materiality reporting requirement requires of us to issue an additional report. I can just see how this report to stakeholders will be relegated to some dark corner. So am I making too much of an issue of the difference between financial materiality and double materiality? I don't think so, and I hope I can convince you on that, because I think it's an important distinction to make. You know, I had a prof at law school who always told us, he was very fond of saying, if you get your concepts wrong, reality will avenge itself. And I've grown old enough to appreciate the truth of that statement. So let me explain to you where we are coming from and why we think having the right paradigm when you talk about introducing sustainability reporting standards, why that is so important. And I've prepared only one slide, and that should be an indication to you of how important this issue is to me. I'm just going to ask them to bring the slide up. There you go. So, the company's role in society, you can see you can have three different perspectives over it. And by the way, this is, comes from work done by the Embedding Project, which is solidly based on research and scholarly work. So we all set off, and hopefully we're beyond that, where we have business, we have society, and we have the planet. And they're three separate circles, and business is like an island. It operates on its own, so does society, and the planet just looks after itself. I think we have since moved on to the middle paradigm, where we acknowledge that there's overlap, that business can't be separated from society or the environment, that there are connections and there are interdependencies. And I would say most of the world is probably there. Where I think we need to move to is that third paradigm on the right-hand side. The one where business is nested within society. It's completely enveloped by society. And society is enveloped by the natural environment, by the planet. Which means that, and the reason why business is in the middle of those three circles is not because business is the most important. It's because business is dependent, and there are certain thresholds put for the operations and activities for business by the society in which it operates and by the planetary boundaries, which we heard in the presentation delivered just before lunchtime. In the middle paradigm, there are no boundaries. The ISSB standards don't provide for any of these boundaries, for these limitations. It's very important that we shift to this right-hand paradigm, because that is reality. The reality is not that business intersect with society and environment. The reality is that business is dependent on society and the environment. And as far as the planet is concerned, that dependency goes in one direction. The planet is not dependent on business. Business is and society is absolutely dependent on the planet. So why don't we not frame our reporting standards according to that paradigm, and not the one where we make business considerations the center of the universe? And that is the reason why I feel strongly about the fact that the King Committee should not retreat on its progressive stance, that we should persist with double materiality. South Africa, where we are, our local conditions, our challenges, I mean, firmly speak to the third paradigm over there. Business is so affected by what is happening to society here, and then also about the planet, climate change, loss of biodiversity, water, and scarcity, and all those things. if we recognize that business is an institution within society, set up by society, then is business not accountable to society? How can we say that we report primarily to the providers of financial capital? So, as far as the King Committee is concerned, I think, and like I say, we are only at the initial stages of our discussions. I cannot see that we will retreat from this point of view. My purpose in making this point is not to say that I'm not advocating against the ISSB standards. To the contrary, what I'm advocating for is some adaptation to accommodate our view of double materiality. I'm talking about our view. It's the King Committee's view, but I think the Companies Act has set its foot in that direction as well. If you look at the objectives of the Companies Act, I'm just going to mention two. The one is that the Act aims to position the company as a provider of not only economic benefit, but also social benefit. Many of you will know that the Companies Act in Section 7, under its objectives, also mention the Bill of Rights, and that companies are meant to promote the Bill of Rights. We have the social and ethics committees, which the Commissioner mentioned before. So, sir, you took some of my time for the photo, so I'm going to ask you to be patient with me for 3 more minutes, please. I'm busy concluding. So, with the Companies Act, we have the Social and Ethics Committee with its obligations. If I heard the Commissioner right, the responsibilities of the Social and Ethics Committees will be enhanced. I mean, that's the direction in which we're moving as a country. So for all of these reasons, I'm advocating, as I say, not against the ISSB standards, but I'm advocating that it be adjusted for local conditions, that we perhaps use the global baseline approach, and my colleague from the IRCSA will talk a little bit more about that, and that we even look at European sustainability reporting standards, because we always talk about we want to align internationally, and then we have in mind the ISSB standards. But the European standards, sustainability reporting standards, use double materiality. So it's not as if there's no very prominent international example for it. So with that, I will conclude on the view of the King Committee. I actually had a couple of more things to say, but I won't push my luck. Thank you.